Good afternoon, everyone. Lovely sunny day outside, and that can only mean one thing. It's Thursday, it's 2 o'clock, and it's time for the M word. Why the two are related to sunshine, M word? Don't know, but it seemed like a good thing to say at the time. So thank you for joining us. Those of you that are new, welcome back. For those of you that have watched a few of these before. And this is episode 5 of the M word, where we like to have a virtual coffee break, although today it's not coffee, it's fizzy pop. And talk about all things design technology related, specifically around the Autodesk design space. And today we're going to focus on AutoCAD and a couple of bits of functionality that are widely used but also widely unknown in the industry, or not leveraged as much as they could be. So I thought we'd focus on those today. Before we get into the crux of it, obviously for those of you that are new, welcome, as I've already said. Please feel free to follow us on our social media channels on LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, so on and so forth. And obviously from a YouTube perspective, hit the like, hit the share, hit the bell to notify when we go live and when there's new content, and feel free to comment and post some feedback as well. One thing that we really want to push with these sessions is making them open and collaborative with you guys. So if there's something that you want to see, a question you have based on something that you have seen or have not yet seen, then reach out, let us know, and we can make these sessions as useful as you may want them to be. So yeah, I can see that I'm already sharing my screen, which I shouldn't have actually been doing, so apologies for that. But I'm going to share my screen now, and we're going to jump straight in and have a look at two pieces of functionality inside of AutoCAD. The first one we're going to look at is dynamic blocks. So taking a standard block inside of AutoCAD and adding some intelligence to it to allow a single component to scale, stretch, flip, or even have visibility states. It's quite easy to get that intelligence built into your blocks, so we're going to talk a little bit about that and step by step show you how it's done. As well as that, we're going to talk about annotative scaling. Bit of a mouthful, that one. But annotative scaling or annotation scaling allows you to control annotation visibility and size on your drawings from AutoCAD without having to have loads of different scales based on the different paper sizes that you have. So we'll talk a little bit about that as well. So without further ado, what we'll do is make me go small in the corner and we'll share my screen. So starting off with dynamic blocks, and I thought I would just give a simple example of using a door. This functionality will work with pretty much any geometry inside of AutoCAD, but for now and for today, I'll keep it really straightforward. But then maybe show you a couple of the out-of-the-box examples in AutoCAD that Autodesk provide to give you some identification on the scalability of this, to show you how far that you can go. But essentially what we have here is a standard two-line or line and arc door in AutoCAD, nothing overly complicated. But what I want to do is turn that into a block and make that block dynamic. The process to do this is really, really straightforward. So as always, once you've got that block, whether you're using keyboard type-ins or not, I'm going to use the mouse buttons today just so you can see where I'm clicking. We're going to choose to create the block. We're going to give that block a name. So for those of you new to AutoCAD, a block is essentially a group of objects that you're going to reuse time and time again. So we define that block within our block definition window. And I'm just going to say that this is RB_door. We choose a base point for the door, which is how this is going to be placed around the model. So I'm just going to pick the base point on the door just there. I've already selected my objects and I can see that I have two selected. And I just want to make sure this is opened in the block editor before pressing OK. And by opening it in the block editor, it's telling AutoCAD that as well as defining that block, I also want that block to be edited in real time there and then. And there's a number of things that you might do when you're inside this block editor. You might add text attributes to control certain parameters or properties against this block as you place it down. Or in the case of what we're doing today, you might be adding some dynamic block intelligence onto there. These can get really complicated. So for today, we're going to try and keep it straightforward. Because what you have within that block editing environment is a tool palette on the left-hand side. If you can't see it, go and hit view and turn on tool palettes and it will pop up. But you've got a tool palette on the left hand side, and that shows us parameters, actions, parameter sets, and then constraints. Okay. Generally, we're going to work top to bottom here, but as a rule of thumb, not for all of them, but as a rule of thumb, you need to start with a parameter, that might define something like a distance or a length or a rotation point, and then we assign an action to that parameter to tell it to do something. So with this door, I want to have one block that's scalable across any door opening that I have in my drawing. So by using a dynamic block, I can have one defined piece of geometry that I can then scale or stretch or flip or rotate however I see fit. So we're going to start by adding a parameter. We're going to choose a length parameter, so a linear point to point. And then I'm going to hover over and click the two base points on my door that define the opening of that component. That just attaches the dimension, if you like, onto your mouse, and I'm just going to click once to place it down underneath that geometry. This gives me two grips and an exclamation mark to show me that I've got grips there that either aren't or are being used. So I've got that distance in, and what I want to do now is go to Actions and choose to assign an action to that parameter. We're going to choose Scale for the purpose of this. It's a really straightforward two-piece of geometry door. So as the door gets wider, the geometry that's defining the actual door panel itself, this straight line, will naturally need to get bigger. And the line that's defining the opening direction and angle of that door, which is this arc, will naturally also need to get bigger to scale with the size of the opening. So we choose a Scale action, and against that action we're going to come in and choose our parameter, which in this case is going to be distance 1. Give it a click, and then we just select our objects. I'm just going to do a window selection around both components and then hit my right click. What that will do is, if I say test my block, is it will leave me in the block editing environment but allow me to test that functionality. Therefore, if I select the block, we can see that I've got my two grips. If I select this one, click, and move it out to the right, select this one and move it out to the right, you can see that the process is scaling. Everything's moving the way that I've told it to. We've got some disconnects between the parameter location and the geometry location. The reason being is I haven't yet limited what this can and can't do. So at the moment we've got two grips. I probably only want one with a single scale direction. So we can now come in, now that we can see that this is working and kind of doing what I want it to do, we can stop people accidentally grabbing the wrong grip, and we can tell something that we only want one grip and which one that we want. So let's close the test block. Let's go to our distance parameter, because that's what's controlling what we can and can't do with regards to that stretch environment. And we're going to right click and go to Properties. This just opens a standard properties palette up inside of AutoCAD, and that's what we can use now to drive differences with the type of movement that's happening there. So if we look in the parameters dialog and just scroll, it's pretty standard, if you like, from an AutoCAD perspective. But what you'll notice here is if we scroll down the right hand side, we've got some options at the bottom. Firstly, I can change the number of grips. I can change it down to one grip, which will focus the grip, in this case, on the right hand side, which is perfect for what I want to do. It will remove the grip from over here on the left. What I can then do is say, well, actually, I don't want to have an unlimited set of doors. I've actually got 3 or 4 specific sizes that I want to work on. So maybe I want to say that this is an increment or even a predefined list. Maybe I want my distance increment to be 220 millimeters. Maybe I want the distance minimum to be 760 millimeters. And I want the distance maximum to be somewhere around, I don't know, big door, 2020. What that will do is it will define these lines and snap points. If we now test our block using the test block button and grab the functionality again by choosing the door and you're grabbing our grip, you'll notice that we can't move it outside of those increment levels. So if you've got a set number of sizes that you do or don't want it to use, we can tell it, and this will only allow me to stretch, in this case, and scale to those specific sizes. So it allows you to start controlling what a designer can and can't do. If you wanted to revert that, just close the test block, go back down under the properties for the distance parameter and change that from increment to maybe a list, if you want to have a predefined list of values. So maybe we're going to go with 887, we're going to go with 900, we're going to go with 920, 1010, and maybe finally 1100. So we can add some more obscure, non-incremental values in there. And again, you can see it places my snap points, and by testing that block, we can come in and start getting functionality to work exactly as we want it to, based on that list of sizes, no less, nowhere in between, and no more. I quite like that setup with this particular example today, so I'm going to leave it on that list value. What else can we do with the dynamic block? Well, as well as being able to make this bigger or smaller to fit in certain size holes or door openings around the building, I might also need to rotate this component around, whether that's by 90 degrees or even by flipping the component. And that's the next thing that I want to talk about, is the flipping functionality. So let's close properties, let's go to our parameters, and we can see that as well as adding linear for stretch and scale, rotation to actually add a rotation by, again, an increment list, or just a freeform. We've also got things like flip and alignment and visibility. These are all really useful in their own way. So let's choose flip. Let's choose a reflection line and a base point. So I'm going to put my base point here. I've already got a grip over this side of the door, so I don't want two grips overlining. So what I'll do is track off of here just to grab roughly the middle. I could do a snap in between 2 points, I guess, but as long as I'm on that line, I don't really mind. And I'm just going to drag that out to the right. It's basically given me a mirror line. We can add a label to that, and it gives me a grip. I can then, much like with the stretch and scale, add an action and say that I want a flip action against this parameter, and I want to flip the following objects: the arc, the line, and also the parameters as well. We're going to say right click, test the block, and show you that now if we select the component, we have the ability to flip it, and once we've flipped it, we have the ability to size it, flip it back, resize it, so on and so forth. I'm doing this fairly quickly today, but what you need to remember is when you're doing this, and the more and more actions you get, you need to make sure that you include all of the elements that you need to flip. So in that case, I've flipped the parameters and everything that went with them. You might find if you forget to do that, when you're stretching something or scaling or flipping or whatever you're doing, it might leave a parameter behind, and once you've flipped it, it might break something and stop working. So generally speaking, just think about it relatively logically and you should be okay. But we can come in and quite quickly start building some intelligence into those blocks. Let's add one more just for argument's sake. Let's come into parameters once again, choose rotation this time. I'm going to choose a base point of the left-hand side of the door, again, because I've got a grip here and a grip in the middle. So let's choose the left-hand side. The radius that I want to work with, I'm just going to drag it out to the size of the door in general. The default rotation, I'm going to essentially have as 360 degrees. And then from there, I choose an action, a rotate using this parameter, and the objects I want to rotate, all of them. Test my block, and alongside the flip, the scale, typically it's not there. Let's close the block, let's have a little look. Okay, there we go. You see it's placed it on my second click. Two grips can't overlap, so I'm just going to have to pick that grip up and just move it a little bit there, which is a bit annoying. Let's just stick it back there. There we go. Test the block once more. Grab our rotation, and you can see that we have the ability to rotate. Again, you've got all the same functionality that you saw earlier. Grab the parameter, go into your properties, and you've got the ability to come down and change your value sets. So if I want an increment of 45 degrees, minimum of 0, maximum of 360, we can then test that block to grab it, rotate it in increments of 45 degrees. Flip it along that new axis and stretch it to its increment points as well. So what we have there, whilst that's a very quick whistle-stop tour, is the ability to very quickly and fairly easily add intelligence to our blocks. That could be an existing block that you're redefining, or that could be a new block. To give you an appreciation of the kind of stuff that you can do, in your default install of AutoCAD, go to View, turn on your tool palettes, and you'll have some default Autodesk made samples. If you are architectural and you are jumping into AutoCAD for a simple 2D design or a quick concept, and you're not using something like Revit for the day, come and have a look at these samples. If I come and place a door metric sample in here, and then maybe a toilet metric sample in here, you can see that we've got our stretch and scale variables, different ways of flipping, depths of door frame, amongst others, such as visibility states to capture specifically when that door is open or when that door is completely closed. If I grab the WC over here on the right hand side, again we've got some flipping functionality and the ability to look at different views of that particular component, allowing us to place internal elevations, sections and plan views, but use one block for everything. It works pretty well. It's fairly easy to set up. Okay. Hopefully this little session's given you a bit of a tip as to where to start. And if you have a look through those, or indeed reach out, you can hopefully get some more functionality in there as to what they can do. But certainly those samples, once you've got your head around the basics, you can kind of pick them apart and see how they've gone about doing something. But by all means, pop in a question in the chat and let us know if you want to see any more specific examples on those. The next thing, very briefly, that I want to discuss is annotative scaling or annotation scaling, because it is something that you go through it in a fundamentals course, but that's only if you're learning AutoCAD, I say here and now, in the last 10 years. This has been around inside of AutoCAD, if not a bit longer than that, probably close to 15 years. But there's a lot of you out there that have been using AutoCAD for longer, and I can guarantee that there'll be someone watching this video that has several dim styles, several text styles that have set up for specific text styling on their paper. You don't need to do that nowadays in AutoCAD. You can have a template with one annotative style that controls what is visible, what isn't visible, and what size. So let's very briefly demonstrate it, explain it, and then we'll be done. So I'm going to grab a simple rectangle, just something really straightforward to go ahead and draw. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw this 1 meter by 750. So it's far too big to fit on a piece of A3 or A4 paper, for example. I'm going to just have two layouts. First layout I'm going to go onto, and I'm going to just go into right click and set up my page. I'm going to modify my page setup and tell this that it is going onto a piece of ISO A3 and it's landscape. Perfect. So there's my A3. Let's place on a viewport. So let's go to my layout. Let's have a base viewport. No, not base view. We want to have a rectangular viewport. And we're just going to say F to fit and press return. On the second layout here, I'm going to leave it on A4, but I'll do the same thing. I'll place a new rectangular and fit it to the page. Let's just turn the grid off in both of those because I don't want it on because it looks horrendous. So we'll just turn that off. And then we'll just scale so we can fit this on. Okay, so maybe we're going to go to 1 to 10 on both of these. Layout 1 and layout 2. Let's just center on the page with the zoom extents and fit 1 to 10. Obviously the A3, the product is slightly smaller because it's a bigger piece of paper. But there we have it. If I go to model space now and go to annotate, what I'm going to do is set my annotation style here to one that's annotative. It's got this little icon. What this allows is it enables these buttons down here. Okay, so your annotations will have a scale that they're set to. It's currently 1 to 1. If I say at 1 to 1, I want to place, maybe we'll use 1 to 20 as a base. At 1 to 20, I'm going to place a dimension here to here. And I'm going to place it down, make sure my snap is correct. Here to here and place it down. Another dimension here to here. Snapping is not working the way I want it to today. There we go, here to here and place it down. They're perfect for what I can see here in model space at 1 to 20 for this particular view. If we go over to layout 1, they don't show. Why? Well, because layout 1 isn't at 1 to 20, it's at 1 to 10. The same on layout 2. If I change layout 1, layout 2, the smaller piece of paper here, to a 1 to 20, not only does the viewport update, it also shows those dimensions. So we can control what dimensions show or don't show at a given scale. And yes, as you would expect, that annotative scale will set a text size for your text on paper. The kicker here, if we change that back to I'll leave that on 1 to 20. If we go back to the model and have on here that we've got add scales to annotative objects when the annotation scale changes. So we're currently on 1 to 20 in model space. If I add that to 1 to 10, you see this. These automatically have got smaller. If I hover over it, it's showing me 2 annotation symbols. If I click it and zoom in, you can see that we've actually got 2 text sizes there. One for the smaller scale, one for the bigger scale. On model space, those 2 pieces of text would arguably be 2 different sizes. On paper, the output on the on the 1 to 10 looks like that. The output on the 1 to 20 looks like that. Okay. We get the result that we would expect based on the size of paper that we have and the settings that we've configured against that annotation scaling. So we can either say that we want annotative objects to add scales automatically, or we can control very specifically per annotation. So if I turn that off, change this back to 1 to 20, add a dimension here to here at 1 to 20, against the properties of that annotation, we can see, if we scroll down, somewhere, we have an annotation scale somewhere. There we go. Annotative scale, typically right at the top, 1 to 20. Because I've turned this off, saying don't show it at all scales, again, much like earlier, it shows it on 1 to 20, but it doesn't show it on 1 to 10. If I change that dimension to also show at 1 to 20 and 1 to 50, it still won't show on my 1 to 10, but it will show on a 1 to 20. And if I change the scale of my view here to a 1 to 50, it will also show that dimension as well as hide the other 2. Why has it hid the other 2? Remember, I've turned off the setting to say automatically add whenever I change a scale. So what it's doing is, rather than choosing the right text style, annotation style, dimension style, whatever it is, for each size of paper, you have one. You tell it what dimensions you want to view at which scale, or say, I want to view all of them, and it will go up and scale them up and scale them down, however you see fit. You have the same annotative scaling for text, dimensions, leaders, you name it, all of the standard annotation styles. It's a bit of a head, it's not the word I was going to use. It's a bit of a confusing subject because it's very different to what many of you are used to. But the key is you have one style and you scale that style to suit your requirements on that drawing. And really, for today, that was my focus, to show you those 2 topics, which is dynamic blocks inside of AutoCAD and annotation scaling inside of AutoCAD as well. So it's been an AutoCAD day, something for everyone, whether you're manufacturing, plant design, electrical design, or architectural engineering construction. That functionality can be used across the board. So hope that's been really useful. Don't forget to like, subscribe, leave a comment, give us some feedback. What do you want to see next week? So back on next Thursday, 2 o'clock, the usual time. And we'll do something more 3D next week, I promise. So we'll be out of AutoCAD and we'll do something 3D. Haven't thought about what yet, but if you've got something you want to see, give us some feedback. But thank you for the time. Enjoy the sunshine this weekend. It looks like it's going to be nice out there. So tidy up those gardens and have a cup of coffee in the garden. Thanks for your time. Take care. See you soon. Goodbye.